Hey guys, checking in again. So today's lesson we're going to go into the gradient intercept form of a line. But firstly, I just want to make this notice right there visible to you guys. Check Microsoft Teams. I would have all sent an email to you yesterday inviting you to join a Microsoft team. Make sure you're on that because I've put some important information in that notice section. I'll also try and send an email out at some point today. Okay, but we're going to start with gradient intercept form. Again, the questions are at the top here. If you want to try and have a go while we're doing these notes, feel free to. Maybe it'll help you out. So, gradient intercept form. We have discussed a linear relationship and how to plot them already. How to plot them. A linear relationship is just anything to do with a straight line, okay? And we can all know how to plot them using a table of values, but we're just going to run through that quickly again now. If I said plot y equals 2x plus 1, okay? Remember, the first thing we need to do when we have a linear equation like that and we are asked to plot it is make a table of values, an x and y table. Now, I remember you guys said you guys always like starting at 0. So I'll just start at 0 today. Hopefully that'll get you a bit more familiar in what we're doing. And 4. Okay. And I'm also just going to copy my graph in so I can make this look nice. And let's leave that there. Okay. So when x is equal to 0, so right in here, that's going to be 2 times 0 plus 1. Well, 2 times 0 is just 0, plus 1, that's going to give me 1. 1 is going to give me 3, 5, 7, and 9. Well, now I have my coordinate pairings. I have my x coordinate and my y coordinate. Remember, x tells me how far I'm going left or right. So I'm going to go 0 left or right and 1 up. So that's right here. And I'm going to mark it 0, 1. Then we have 1, 3. 2, 5. 3, 7. And lastly, we have 4, 9. And then I can connect all of them with a straight line. No. There we go. Okay. Now join them all up with a straight line. Okay, well, let's try and find the gradient of this line. So I'm going to go and I'm going to try and find the run and the rise just between my first 2 points. So I've gone across 1, I've gone up 2. So remember that my gradient m equals rise over run, which equals 2 over 1, which is equal to 2. So I know that the gradient of this line is equal to 2. The gradient is equal to 2. There's also one other important piece of information that my line will tell us, and that's where I cut the y-axis. Remember, the y-axis is this line here. That's my y-axis, my vertical axis there. Okay? And so where do I cut the y-axis? At what point of y do I cut the y-axis? Well, it's this point here at 0, 1. And I call this my y-intercept. Now, why is this important? Well, because when we write y equals 2x plus 1, y equals 2x plus 1 is written in gradient-intercept form. And we call it gradient-intercept form because once you write it like that, you can easily pick out the gradient and the y-intercept just from the equation of the graph. Gradient-intercept form is y equals mx plus c. M being the gradient and c being the y-intercept. So if I go back and I write my first equation, my y equals 2x plus 1, well, following my gradient-intercept form, 2 should be the gradient, 2 should be the gradient, and 1 should be my y-intercept. My y-intercept, where the point cuts the y-axis. Well, if I look back at the top, look back to my line, okay? My gradient is 2, so that works. My y-intercept is 1. So both of my points are valid. So it is clearly gradient-intercept form because it is where the points are. The intercept is at 1, the gradient is at 2. Y equals mx plus c is gradient-intercept form. Where m is the gradient and c is the y-intercept. Most straight lines, you want them in gradient-intercept form. It makes everything so much easier. So if you ever get a line that isn't in gradient-intercept form, always, always, always try and make it into gradient-intercept form because it makes life so much easier. The y-intercept will always, always, always be equal to c, or the constant that's at the end of an equation. And there are also some special lines that we need to consider that we've already talked about, but we should consider horizontal lines, vertical lines, and lines I can't spell, sorry. Lines that pass through the origin. Lines that pass through the origin. I can't spell again. So what do we need to consider about horizontal, vertical, and lines that pass through the origin? Well, a horizontal line has a gradient that's equal to 0. That flat line just has a gradient that's equal to 0. A vertical line has a gradient That is undefined. Okay, so horizontal lines have a gradient of 0. Vertical lines have an undefined gradient because we can't walk up a wall, essentially. And if we pass through the origin, well, the origin is the point 0, 0. So it means that our y-intercept is 0. Okay, so these are important things to remember about some of these different kinds of lines. So we'll start off with stating, so state the gradient and y-intercept for. Okay, so for my gradient, I'm going to have y equals 3x take 7. Sorry, my first line will be y equals 3x take 7. And my second line is going to be y equals x over 2 plus 4. Well, let's have a look. I have an m value for gradient. I have a c value for the intercept. Well, it needs to follow y equals mx plus c. I can see that my m value for this line is equal to 3. So my gradient is going to be equal to 3. My c value is where I need to be careful because the number is 7. But there's also a minus sign there. So we know it's actually negative 7. MC, 4 is my number here, but it's a positive 4, so my C is going to be 4. M is where it gets a bit tricky, because if I said that mx equals x over 2, well, what is m equal to? What have I multiplied x by? I've multiplied x by a half, so my gradient for this one is actually equal to a half. Okay, if you ever have a fraction like that, always be really careful because the gradient isn't 2, the gradient is actually a half. And now we're going to go back to sketching lines, so sketch the following. And we're going to have some lines here. We're going to have the line y equals negative 2x plus 4. We're going to have the line y equals 3x. The line x equals negative 4. And the line y equals negative 2. And let's get my graph back up here. And I might make it a bit bigger. There we go. Just so we can see a bit more of these points. Cool. So, we now want to try and pick out some of the important information from each of the equations of these lines that will help us sketch this graph. So let's start with our first one, y equals negative 2x plus 4. Well, the gradient, that's equal to m, so that's going to be equal to negative 2. And the y-intercept is equal to 4. Well, if my y-intercept is equal to 4, I can go on my line where 4 should be, and I know that's going to be my intercept. That's going to be there at 0, 4. Well, my gradient is negative 2. So I can just figure it out from there. I can go down 2 and across 1. Because my run is always going to be 1, but my rise is going to be negative 2. Now, all I ever need to find a line is 2 points. So if I get 2 points that I know are on my line, then I can make that straight line. and I can connect these straight lines. And it's gonna look something like this. Okay? Now, y equals 3x. My gradient is 3. Well, my c, I've got no number at the end there. I haven't added anything to the end. So my y-intercept is actually 0 in this case, because there's no number here. We haven't added anything, right? So if we haven't added anything, that just means that my y-intercept is 0. So from 0, right there, 0, 0, I have a gradient of 3, which means my rise is 3 and my run is 1. So I go across 1, up 3, I'm going to be here at that point 1, 3. And then I have 2 points. I can now make another line and connect them. So there we go with that line. X equals -4. Well, if I say that x is equal to -4, that's going to be right there, that point. And so this line actually represents all the possible points where x is going to be equal to -4. This is actually a vertical line at x is equal to -4. And so you guys can probably gather that y equals -2, that's a horizontal line. Horizontal line at y equals -2, which is going to be here. So let's just draw them in now. Completely vertical line right there, just all the way down. And then we're going to have a horizontal line at y equals -2. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're going to be doing with all of these lines and some of these application type questions. You will be asked to sketch, you will be asked to find the intercepts from a graph. You may also be asked of some problem solving questions, making sure you understand what they all mean. Okay, again, questions are at the top there. I'll also put these questions in the calendar for us to look at once you get started. Have a good go at them.